Here is something the British press will not tell you directly. The same newspapers that spent decades building Diana into a saint while quietly, methodically eroding her from the inside, are now turning the same machinery on her son. The same editorial rooms, the same calculated language, the same game. And most people reading the headlines this week saw a story about a prince being called tone deaf. What they may have missed is the older, more dangerous story running quietly underneath it. Because William has seen this before, he watched it happen to his mother. And the question this video is really asking is not whether William and Catherine are out of touch. The question is why, after years of praising them for almost everything, has the British press suddenly decided they need to be held to a standard that has never been applied to any royal before them? Why now? And who benefits from that timing? The palace did not say it openly, but those who watch closely may have noticed something worth paying attention to. Today we are going to look past the headlines. Two articles appeared this week, one from The Independent, one from the Daily Mail, calling William and Catherine tone deaf. We are going to examine what those articles actually said, what they left out, and what sits beneath them. Because this is not simply a story about a school run or a housing initiative. This is a story about who controls the narrative of the British monarchy, and whether William will allow the same press establishment that consumed his mother to define him the same way. That is the real story. And the palace, as always, is saying nothing, which, as we will see, may itself be the most important signal of all. William has always been careful with the press, deliberately, methodically careful. Those who study his public conduct note a pattern that has held for more than a decade. He engages on his own terms, at a pace he controls, through formats that do not require him to be emotionally exposed in ways he cannot manage. Some observers call this controlling, others call it strategic. What is difficult to dispute is that this posture is not accidental. It was learned, and it was learned from watching his mother. Diana understood instinctively that proximity to the press was power. She made herself available, made herself human, made herself vulnerable in carefully chosen moments, and the public loved her for it. But the same press that built her used the same access to slowly, systematically undermine her. The words she gave them, the images she allowed, the emotional moments that seemed to belong to her and actually belonged to them. William was 15 when he lost her. The wound is not abstract. It is the operating principle behind almost every public decision he has made since. So when William sat for a radio interview and described his children's school run, the jam sandwiches, the car arguments over music, the ordinary morning chaos of 3 children going to class, the British press reached immediately for the language of performance. Tone deaf, they said. Staged relatability. A prince pretending to be someone he is not. The Independent called it a motherland moment, implying that the comparison to ordinary parenthood was so strained it collapsed under examination. The Daily Mail followed with a piece arguing that William's immense personal wealth makes him categorically unqualified to lead on housing. These are not small charges, and the evidence offered is real. The school fees of over £10,000 per term, the permanent nannies, the police protection officers following the school run, the helicopter on standby. The privilege is real, but there is a pattern here that the articles chose not to examine, and that pattern changes everything. Diana was also living in a palace when she sat beside men dying of AIDS. Diana was also surrounded by security when she walked through Angolan landmine fields. Nobody said Diana's lived experience disqualified her from those rooms. The press that now insists on lived experience as the test of royal authenticity gave Diana no such test. Because Diana gave them access. She let them watch. She made herself available to be photographed, and the photographs made newspapers. William does not give them that, and that changes everything about how his work is interpreted. The central image in this week's criticism is a simple one: a school run, a car, a father, 3 children, jam sandwiches making a mess of the seats, the kind of mourning that millions of parents recognize in some form, even if the details of William's version are vastly more comfortable than most. What the Independent argued is that the gap between his mourning and an ordinary mourning is simply too large for the comparison to function. Mothers hopping buses, cars that have never seen a valet. No helicopters, no police escort. The journalist acknowledged that William appears to be a hands-on father, but argued that the frame of reference is too different for the image to carry genuine resonance. This is a fair point to raise. What is interesting is the framing chosen to raise it, because Diana did something very similar. Diana used ordinary moments to build connection across an extraordinary life. She picked up her boys from school. She spoke about them in public. She made the monarchy feel like something that could be inhabited by real feelings. The press did not call that performance. They called it a gift. The difference between Diana's school-run moments and William's is not the distance between palace and pavement. It is the relationship with the press. Diana gave them the story. William gives them the summary, and summaries do not sell the same way. The smallest royal gesture can carry the heaviest meaning. In this case, the jam sandwich is not just a jam sandwich. It is a test of whether the press still controls the interpretation of royal life. And the British tabloids, for all their professed concern about privilege, are failing that test with significant clarity. The Daily Mail piece moves beyond the school run and lands on a larger question. Can William credibly lead on housing? The author, Liz Jones, argues no. His personal wealth, Forest Lodge, rented for £300,000 a year, Kensington Palace, and over £20 million in annual duchy income, places him so far outside the experience of housing insecurity that his initiative, however well-funded, cannot carry genuine moral authority. Jones draws on her own painful experience. In 2018, she lost her home. She knows what eviction fear feels like. The particular humiliation of being told by a landlord what you can and cannot do with the space you are trying to call home. She argues from that experience that William cannot know this, that no amount of money spent changes the fact that he does not. This would be a serious argument if it were applied consistently. But it is not applied consistently. The royal family has supported mental health causes without anyone insisting on personal experience with mental illness. They have championed veterans without insisting they must have lost a limb. When the late Queen Elizabeth championed continuity and duty through decades of national crisis, no one said her extraordinary, hereditary privilege disqualified her from speaking on behalf of a public that had never inherited anything. The standard being applied to William's housing initiative is a standard constructed specifically to delegitimize this particular piece of work at this particular moment. And the timing is worth noticing. The Duchy of Cornwall housing plan represents real money, £500 million, including £160 million directed at housing. It is not a gesture. It is not a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It is a structural commitment that, if delivered, would represent one of the most concrete contributions a member of the royal family has made to a domestic social problem in living memory. That is not the sentence the Daily Mail chose to write. Instead, they called it a hobby project. When the work is large enough to be real, it becomes large enough to be dangerous. Not to the homeless, but to those who profit from the idea that royals are merely decorative. A monarchy that builds homes does not need the press to confirm it is useful. The homes confirm it. And that is a version of royal relevance that tabloid editors cannot monetize, which may be exactly why the language this week turned so sharp so suddenly. The conflict underneath this week's coverage is older than either article. It is a struggle that has defined the relationship between the British press and the British monarchy for generations, and it is entering a new and consequential phase now, as William moves closer to the throne. For most of the 20th century, the arrangement between press and palace was understood by both sides. The press received access. The royals received favorable coverage. The transaction was not always comfortable, but it functioned. It began to fracture with Diana, not because she violated it, but because she was so skilled at working within it that she became more powerful than the arrangement could manage. The public loved her in a way that exceeded what the press could contain. And when the arrangement could no longer manage her, it destroyed her. William has drawn the most important possible lesson from this. He has chosen not to enter the arrangement. He does not offer the access that generates the favorable coverage. He accepts the unfavorable coverage that results. And he continues building his agenda regardless. Royal watchers have described this as unusual in the modern era. A future king who has essentially decided that the press's approval is not the metric by which he will measure his success. The Daily Mail and The Independent are not ideologically similar publications. They serve very different readers and operate from very different political positions. What they share this week is a common frustration, a future king whose agenda is moving forward without their involvement. The housing initiative was not broken exclusively to either of them. It was not explained through their journalists in long-form interviews they could sell. It was announced through official channels backed by institutional commitment and left to stand or fall on its actual results. That is not how the press prefers to receive royal news. They prefer to receive it through themselves, so they become part of the story. William is trying to take the press out of the story. That is what the jam sandwiches moment is really about. It is not about whether William is relatable. It is about whether the press gets to decide whether he is relatable. He offered a human moment on his own terms, in his own format. They received it and reframed it as inauthenticity. The message they sent is clear. If you will not give us access, we will not give you meaning. We will take the moments you offer and drain them of what you intended. This is the press asserting editorial power over royal narrative in the face of a couple that is refusing to concede it. And it matters enormously, because the outcome of this struggle will shape the way the British public receives William and Catherine for years, possibly decades, to come. Catherine's role in this is rarely fully examined, but it is central. She has demonstrated over more than a decade an ability to build public trust in formats that are entirely her own. The early years' work, the photography, the carefully chosen public moments that feel genuine precisely because they are rare. She does not give frequent interviews. She does not often explain herself. But when she does appear, the public receives her with a warmth that has proven resistant to sustained press criticism. Her return to public life after her illness last year was handled with a combination of dignity, strategic timing, and emotional honesty that left even critics with little to say. You cannot manufacture that kind of return. The public watched her come back and chose to receive her. That is trust built through behavior, not headlines. Queen Elizabeth managed the tension between palace and press through absolute consistency and absolute restraint. She gave the press just enough to work with and never enough to use against her. William and Catherine are attempting something harder, genuine engagement on substantive causes, without surrendering the narrative to those who would use it against them. It is a more difficult path, but it may be the only one that leads where they need to go. William stands at one of the most difficult intersections in the history of the British monarchy. He is heir to an institution that has survived by adapting, but he is doing so at a moment when adaptation requires him to engage with problems, housing, homelessness, the environment, that require not just gestures but solutions. His wealth is enormous. His power is real but not yet formal. What is observable is the consistency, the Homewards Initiative, the Duchy of Cornwall Land Plan, the Earthshot Prize. These are not one-off gestures. They represent a pattern of someone trying to make himself useful in a way that outlasts any single headline. Whether he succeeds is genuinely unknown. The question of whether a hereditary monarch can build legitimate moral authority on issues of economic inequality is one that no royal before him has fully answered. But the attempt is real, and the consistency of the attempt, across multiple years and multiple causes, suggests something more than performance. Catherine is carrying the emotional weight of the future monarchy in a way that is rarely fully acknowledged. Her cancer diagnosis last year and the carefully controlled way she navigated her return to public life produced a quality of public sympathy and respect that could not be engineered artificially. She did not over-explain. She did not perform suffering. She returned steadily, and the public responded with something that looked very much like relief. That kind of connection is not manufactured by headlines. It is built slowly, through consistent behavior, through genuine presence, and through the willingness to step back when stepping back is what honesty requires. Liz Jones, the author of the Daily Mail piece, is herself a complicated figure in this story. Her personal losses, her account of losing her home in 2018, give her argument its emotional core. But her history of writing about the royals swings widely enough that readers on both sides have found her either too critical or not critical enough at different moments. What she brought this week is personal feeling about privilege and housing that has found a royal target. The question is not whether that feeling is legitimate, it is whether the target is accurate and whether the standard being applied would survive being applied to anyone else attempting the same work. The palace will not respond to these articles. This is almost certain. And it is not weakness, it is doctrine. Queen Elizabeth refined this doctrine over 70 years. Do not validate the frame you are being placed in by engaging with it. Do not give the newspaper that has decided to undermine you the satisfaction of appearing in your diary as a concern. Continue working. Let the work answer. The silence communicates something the palace would never say in words. We do not require your interpretation in order to proceed. The housing initiative will move forward or not on its own terms. The school run will continue because it serves the children, not because it serves a radio interview. The public will eventually judge by results, and results do not need editorial endorsement. In royal life, silence is rarely empty. Here it says more than a statement would. It says the work continues. It says the relationship between the palace and the tabloids is being renegotiated, not through confrontation, not through public statements, but through the quiet accumulation of actions that do not require any newspaper to give them meaning. That is a kind of power the press finds very difficult to write about. Because writing about it is the one thing that confirms it is real. This story matters because it is a rehearsal for everything that comes next. William's eventual accession is no longer a distant abstraction. King Charles' health has brought the question of succession into a more urgent frame than most people publicly acknowledge. When William becomes king, however that moment arrives, he will inherit not just the throne, but the entire question of what the monarchy is for. The press attack this week is on one level small. 2 articles, a radio interview, a school run. But the argument these articles are making is not small. They are arguing that privilege categorically disqualifies the Prince of Wales from moral leadership on the issues he has chosen. If that argument were accepted broadly, it would leave the future monarchy with precisely 2 options: perform ceremonial functions without any real agenda, or choose an agenda the press approves of. Neither option preserves the kind of institutional independence that Queen Elizabeth spent her entire reign protecting. Diana understood this problem from a different direction. She used her position to go into rooms the institution was afraid of, and her presence gave those rooms a visibility that saved lives by generating funding and changing policy. The press loved this while it served the arrangement. When it stopped serving the arrangement, they found ways to call it manipulation. The pattern is not new. The direction it points in is clear. William's approach appears to be built on a conviction that a monarchy which genuinely delivers on social commitments will be more durable than one which performs social concern while delivering nothing. This is not a naive position. It is, arguably, the most sophisticated understanding of institutional survival that any member of the British royal family has publicly demonstrated since Elizabeth II. It is also, inevitably, going to generate exactly this kind of resistance from those who profit from the older model. The question is not whether the press will keep applying pressure. They will. The question is whether the work, if it is real work, will outlast the pressure. Diana's work did. Her legacy outlasted everything that was used against her, including her own death. William knows this better than anyone alive. He watched it happen. And he appears to have decided that the way to honor it is not to replicate it, but to build something she would have recognized, consistent, genuine, and ultimately beyond the reach of tomorrow's front page. Diana sat beside men dying of AIDS when the rest of the world was afraid to be in the same room with them. She held their hands. She came back. She was living in Kensington Palace at the time. She had never been sick with what they had. She had never experienced the fear of what they were facing, but nobody in the British press said, "Princess Diana, your privilege disqualifies you from this room." Nobody wrote that her royal household undermined her authenticity. They said the opposite. They said she was proof that the heart can transcend the circumstances it was born into. They said genuine presence is its own form of qualification. They said the work is what matters, not the postcode of the person doing it. William grew up in the same house she came home to after those visits. He was a child watching his mother navigate the impossible, being royal and being real at the same time. He lost her at 15, and now he is trying in his own way, in his own time, with his own family and his own causes, to be something she would have recognized. Not a reproduction, not a performance. something earned through choices that accumulate slowly into a record. The press that calls him tone deaf this week may find itself, in 10 years, writing about homes built on Duchy of Cornwall land as though they always believed the work would succeed. That is how the British press has always operated. It builds, tears down, and then rebuilds what it cannot dismiss once the facts on the ground make the original framing impossible to sustain. Diana did not need the press to believe in her work while she was doing it. She needed to do it. The belief followed. Sometimes it followed her into a room where people were dying, and that was enough. The palace did not say it openly, but the message was difficult to ignore. Some things do not require a statement. They require only the continued presence of someone who has decided to show up, regardless. Diana was told in ways both direct and indirect throughout her life that she was not qualified for the rooms she chose to walk into. Too emotional, too unconventional, too willing to make the monarchy human in ways the institution found uncomfortable. And now she is the standard against which every member of the royal family is measured, including the son who was 15 when he lost her. So I want to leave you with one question today. If William builds genuine results, real homes, real support for people facing housing insecurity, real measurable change through the Duchy of Cornwall initiative, will it matter to you that he grew up in a palace? Is the standard being applied to him actually about results? Or is it about something older, something that has more to do with access, and with who gets to own the meaning of the British monarchy? Tell me in the comments below. I read everyone, and I will see you in the next episode.